joins us now, political reporter for Time, and joins us from Washington. Zeke, thanks for your time. Lots to get to here, but I want to begin playing you something that Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway said just this morning about her candidate's refusal once again to pledge to accept the outcome of the election, and get you to weigh in on the other side.
What Donald Trump has said over time, if you take all of his statements together, Chris, he has said that he will respect the results of the election, but everybody, including Al Gore in 2000, waits to see what those election results are. You wait to see what the results are, if they're verified, if they're certified. Al Gore himself called to concede that race in 2000. He called George W. Bush, congratulated him for being the victor, and then called back and retracted the concession. Right. If you had had Al Gore in this seat 16 years ago, and you asked him the same question, Chris, if you said, Vice President Gore, if you win the popular vote and you're losing Florida by less than 600 votes, and it will be decisive to the election, will you concede the election?
Yeah, it's not the situation, though.
Now, Zeke, this seems a snapshot of the campaign at present. We have seen surrogates, as we saw last night, say one thing, and then we've seen Donald Trump take to a stage, as he did last night, and say something else entirely, and then watched as those same surrogates, in this case Kellyanne Conway and his running mate Mike Pence, following the debate, retract things they had said minutes, hours prior. The tightrope here being walked by campaign staffers is what?
You know, it's kind of that old Groucho Marx line, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? You know, there's an element of whitewashing here, sort of in the moment of what, you know, of people around Donald Trump and the candidate himself. You know, they're trying to have it both ways. They both want to motivate their core base of supporters, the people who love Donald Trump. Many of them believe that this election is being rigged or stolen from him, who don't believe how he could possibly lose this race. While they're also, if you're Mike Pence, if you're Kellyanne Conway, they have, number one, their own reputations to protect, and as well as, you know, they know that this particular issue, questioning the legitimacy of an American election a couple weeks out from it, is unprecedented for a major party nominee. And that, you know, it does scare away some of those conservative voters, who are more moderate voters who, you know, don't particularly love Donald Trump, don't particularly love Hillary Clinton, and that this could be a big turnoff for them. So they have to walk that bit of that tightrope. But it's also, you know, but when it's not Donald Trump saying it, you know, it really doesn't mean anything. It's really, all this comes down to ultimately what the candidate will say on November 8th at midnight or November 9th in the morning. And right now, every indication from Donald Trump has been that he's going to keep us all up in the air, rather than saying he was going to, you know, congratulate the victor, whomever it may be.
Now, we saw Al Gore and his failed run in 2000 invoked there. It should be noted that Al Gore called for a recount in Florida following the election, and that recount would show that he lost the state by 537 votes. What we've seen from Donald Trump to this point, prior to the election, in something that presidential historian Douglas Brinkley says is the most pointed attack on the legitimacy of the American electoral process that he has seen since 1860, is quite obviously something entirely different. It certainly seems, if nothing else, to be something problematic for Donald Trump that won't be any less so in the 19 days to the election.
Oh, exactly. I mean, the things we're hearing from him so far, things like that this election is being rigged at the ballot box, talking about widespread voter fraud, particularly in inner cities, sort of the coded language many view as racist. It's really, there's not, you know, with no evidence. You know, there's been a lot of studies, a lot of political science on whether or not there is voter fraud. And it really isn't there. You know, one of the great ironies of all of this is that we've heard from a lot of Republican candidates over the last, you know, decade or so talk about the need for stringent voter ID laws to prevent voter fraud, and now even they are recoiling at sort of the candidate taking that rhetoric just a step too far as he tries to rile up his base. But really, this becomes a threshold issue for a lot of Republican voters who don't like either candidate, and that's sort of the big factor here. Normally, in a general year, 20% of 25% of the electorate likes both candidates, and 3% doesn't like either of them. They're kind of the cynics. This year, it's sort of those numbers are reversed. A lot of voters don't like either of them and are looking for the lesser of two evils, or staying home. And Donald Trump just made himself maybe a little bit more evil with that line of attack.
No, Donald Trump, his campaign has been called something without precedent, dating back now to the primary season for his repeated embrace of all manner of conspiracy theory. And it would appear just moments ago he did it again. I mean, Zeke, I think you were sitting down to prepare for this interview, so I can't ask you to advance this with your reporting, but he tweeted the following. Why didn't Hillary Clinton announce that she was inappropriately given the debate questions? She secretly used them, ! Crooked Hillary, end tweet. Again, 11 minutes ago, tweeted by Donald Trump. What do you make of it?
Well, number one, if Donald Trump is very confident in his victory, why is he coming out and saying that, she had the questions in advance? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. He did level his charge against her similarly on Saturday in New Hampshire about the second debate. As well, and he seems, this is all coming out of a little bit of one of the WikiLeaks documents where it seemed that Donna Brazile had access to some of the town hall questions from one of the CNN town halls in one of her primary debates with Bernie Sanders. There is no evidence that she's ever had access to any of these CPD debate questions. As Chris Wallace, the moderator last night, said at the top of the debate, he doesn't share those questions with anyone outside of his own network. And to think that in the grand conspiracy that Donald Trump has sort of constructed in the last few weeks, now that Fox News is in on it too, is kind of maybe a bridge too far for we're several bridges too far, but this might be just one more bridge too far.
Well, because the timing here, then it would seem, is everything, as well as perhaps the parsing of verb tense, because you do again refer to something that did come out with regard to Donna Brazile in the WikiLeaks dump, but this sent now would certainly seem to refer to last night's debate.
It certainly looks that way, and there's just no evidence of that. And and certainly that's not the type of language you hear from somebody who's confident in that. And, if anything, the taunt from him would be, she had the questions in advance and I still won. That's not there. If anything, it's a sign of weakness, a sign of that he is not confident in the outcome of the outcome last night and also the outcome of the election 19 days from now.
Quickly, our Major Garrett was reporting that in his talks with Republicans following the debate last night, some felt that Donald Trump may have done well enough to stop the flow of seats from both the House and the Senate, that perhaps the congressional majorities, given his performance last night and over the three collectively, were enough to keep those majorities with the GOP. Is that your sense?
The House is always going to be a very tall order for Democrats to flip. The Senate, really does seem to be on the bubble right now. The question is just how much legs does this sort of Donald Trump undermining or questioning the legitimacy of the American electoral process have over the next 19 days? There really is no big moment between now and Election Day. And if we spend a lot of the next, 2.5 weeks talking about Donald Trump in that way, that might very well may flip the Senate for Democrats. The House, probably not so much, given just the underlying dynamics of already that exist there.
Zeke, get you out of here on this one. 24 hours again after last night. Clinton and Trump will meet again. They will be in the same room at the Al Smith dinner here in New York City. It is a tradition and certainly something that, in theory, would be far tonally from what we saw last night. What do you expect?
It's a hard one. We've never seen them sort of in that more casual setting telling jokes. Traditionally that's where you have both candidates of this black tie fundraising dinner for the New York Archdiocese for charity are up there and they're telling jokes, sort of lighthearted jokes about the other ones, some self-deprecating ones. We've never really seen either of them been able to do that in this format. It could be a sort of an elucidating moment to really understand who these people are, who these nominees are as people. Can they take a punch? Can they throw one in a way that is appropriate for that venue? And coming off sort of how heated this race might be, it could be a bit of a palate cleanser after last night.
And if nothing else, I suppose it allows them both to perhaps workshop some material in advance of next year's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Times Zeke Miller, as always, appreciate the insight, Zeke.
Thanks for having me.